The pain was sharp, fierce and sudden, starting from his abdomen and shooting throughout the rest of his gut. Alfred fell to the floor, clutching his stomach, and with tears in his eyes, began to pray that maybe this time the pain would subside quickly, or even better, perhaps the pain would become so great that it would just burst open his bowel and put an end to his suffering once and for all. King Alfred, better remembered to history as Alfred the Great, was the fearsome and intelligent King of Wessex who had grand ambitions and dreams of a united England, but he would pass away before he could see his illustrious goal fulfilled. However, the end for Alfred would not be quick, nor would it be painless. While Alfred was conquering the Vikings and defeating his many enemies, his body was conquering his will to live and was rapidly becoming his greatest foe. There are many discourses and theories present which have aimed at identifying the troubling illness which caused significant discomfort and pain to the great king for much of his life. In this video, we will delve deep into the predominating thoughts by contemporary medieval sources as well as modern historians into what illness or sickness may have been the most likely potential culprit of Alfred the Great's death. However, before we can proceed to comprehend the significance of King Alfred's death, it is first important to have a very basic understanding of Alfred's life, as this legendary monarch was a beacon of hope for all of Christendom and those opposed to Viking rule. Furthermore, by having a cursory knowledge of Alfred's reign and deeds, the impact of his death and passing on English history will possess much more significance for the viewer. Alfred was the fifth and youngest son of King Aethelwulf, the ruler of Wessex, and the chances of him becoming King of Wessex at the time of his birth seemed minuscule, as he had four healthy elder brothers ahead of him in the line of succession to inherit the crown. Being the youngest son of King Aethelwulf, though, benefited Alfred immensely, as this gave him the freedom to spend much of his childhood following his greatest passion, engrossing himself in the literature of the time, including poetry, historical documents, and religious texts to get a better understanding of war, politics, and religion. This heightened level of education, understanding, and knowledge will play a fundamental role in securing Alfred's legacy as one of the greatest monarchs in England's history. However, Alfred's childhood was not all roses and sunshine, as his own personal biographer Asser records in his work The Life of King Alfred that Alfred was a sickly child from his youth, and an undiagnosed chronic medical condition caused him much pain and discomfort for the duration of his life. However, Alfred did not let something as trivial as constant pain and distress from his chronic illness hinder his ambitions, and he would become a respected warrior king after defeating the invading Viking forces at the battles of Englefield, Ashdown, and Edington. And by effectively utilizing his superior political acumen, martial prowess, and his reputation as a wise and intelligent monarch, Alfred was able to halt Viking expansion and maintain an effective peace with the Vikings and many of his neighboring kingdoms. But as Alfred continued to grow in might, repute, and power, his health would follow a reverse trajectory, and as he aged, his chronic illness became more increasingly difficult to manage and to ignore. As fierce as the willpower and fortitude of King Alfred was, even he could not withstand the pain protruding throughout his body, and he would eventually succumb to this chronic and now fatal illness in 899 AD at approximately the age of 50. But what was this mystery illness that for so long had troubled King Alfred and would ultimately take away his life prematurely? Fortunately for us, King Alfred's biographer Asser provides an in-depth first-hand account of the various symptoms Alfred suffered with as a result of his illness. Asser states in his biography of King Alfred that, but by the inspiration of God, and with the constant and unremitting pain of that disorder in the bowels which he always had, and that sometimes with such severity that it almost seemed to threaten his life, he never desisted from his vow, and through God's mercy he never has been overcome by this pain. This description of pain in the bowel is also highlighted by another statement in Asser's The Life of King Alfred. In the course of his whole life, through unknown attacks and frequent diseases of the mind, and also of the body, namely from the diseases of the bowel which caused him acute pain, and of another which he does not remember, for a full 20 years before he became king, and afterwards without intermission until he was 46. Therefore, based on the first-hand description of Asser's accounts of King Alfred suffering from severe bowel pain throughout much of his reign, the most popular and prevalent discourse by modern historians and medical professionals is that King Alfred may have suffered from a gastrointestinal disorder, such as Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, or hemorrhoidal disease, as there's clear evidence that King Alfred suffered from severe bowel pain throughout a prolonged period of his life. The common discourse of an inflammatory bowel disease such as Crohn's or ulcerative colitis makes perfect sense. It is impossible to state, based off the limited resources we possess about Alfred's health, to efficiently conclude which of these two types of inflammatory bowel disease may have been the source of Alfred's lifelong discomfort, as both illnesses possess a significant overlap of symptoms. Aside from both diseases causing severe abdominal and bowel pain, they share other symptoms such as rectal bleeding, weight loss, diarrhea, and many other similar features. Crohn's disease, however, differs from ulcerative colitis, as Crohn's can result in inflammation anywhere in the digestive tract from the mouth to the anus, where colitis occurs specifically in the large intestine. And another important factor to consider is that since Crohn's disease affects the larger part of the gastrointestinal tract, that many individuals suffering with this disease are more likely to present symptoms such as mouth sores and anal fissures, ulcers, tears, and narrowing. As harrowing as all those symptoms sound, they are just a small sample of the complications and issues irritable bowel disease can cause. So although we may never be able to conclusively determine if Crohn's or ulcerative colitis was the ultimate reason behind the death of Alfred, they are definitely high probable contenders based on the only contemporary sources we have available which make a reference to Alfred's health problems. Secondary theory, which expands upon the inflammatory bowel disease discourse, is that Alfred may have died from secondary infections or complications due to untreated Crohn's or ulcerative colitis. This again is a very probable discourse, as the poor sanitary conditions alongside the limited medical knowledge of medieval England made the risks of death from infections exceptionally high. When one considers the time of when Alfred lived, it is not improbable to consider that a mix of poor medical knowledge alongside a chronic illness could have led to an infection or another complication which ultimately took the life of Alfred the Great. The last theory, which occasionally gets mentioned in regards to the illness that Alfred spent much of his life contending with, may not have been a physical ailment but a psychosomatic illness instead. An unpopular and not well attested theory, but one that does have respected historians such as Hutchinson, Rubin, and Alfred P. Smith supporting this thought process. I feel it is only fair that this theory should at least be discussed, if not seriously considered. But the psychosomatic illness theory purports that King Alfred had to deal with immense emotional and psychological stress throughout his reign, especially internal court politics and constant Viking invasions, which took a massive toll on Alfred's mental health, and this manifested in physical symptoms which resulted in constant abdomen and bowel pain for the monarch. Again, it is important to reiterate that this theory is not seriously considered by a majority of historical scholars, and the general critique against this theory is that the physical pain that Alfred experienced during the end of his reign was tremendous, but his kingdom of Wessex was at peace and as stable as one could expect during medieval Europe. Therefore, his emotional and psychological stress would have been minimal considered to any other point of his reign, but the physical symptoms of his illness continued to increase in severity. So yes, it is definitely plausible to accept that mental and psychological stress from Alfred's duties as a monarch and a warrior king would definitely have made his illness worse. It is improbable to state that Alfred's chronic illness was wholly a psychosomatic development. So to conclude, the death of Alfred was a slow and brutal affair, and if his biographer Asser is to be believed, then the great monarch had to contend with severe abdominal pain for much of his reign. This leads the majority of historians to accept the premise that Alfred suffered from a chronic gastrointestinal disease such as Crohn's or ulcerative colitis. There is very little evidence to refute this theory, and it is the discourse which I believe explains the chronic illness of Alfred the best. But let me know in the comments down below if you agree that King Alfred died from an irritable bowel disease, or if you think there is some other explanation for his death that has not been considered in this video. And remember, if you want to learn about the death of some of history's greatest figures, then subscribe to my channel Historical Exit, and thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.